When you realize what your future can be, you want to do it right. UCF Online offers more than 100 fully online programs, plus personalized support from success coaches, so you can get to the future that's right for you.
From the University of Louisville's Delphi Center for Teaching and Learning.
And the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning.
I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And I am Tom Cavanaugh.
And you're listening to the final 15 episodes of Topcast, the Teaching Online podcast.
Final 15 scheduled episodes, Dr. Thompson.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Yeah. I was talking to somebody last week I was at an event and mentioned to them they mentioned the podcast, and I said, yeah, well, we're in the final 15. I'm not sure if they had caught that announcement yet, but I said, leave the feed open because, Kelvin and I are probably not ones to just be done. We're going to have thoughts on things, and we're going to want to pop into that feed periodically with something. And so, yeah, I would say the same thing to all our listeners.
Don't unsubscribe. Stay tuned in. Mm-hmm. There might be, I was going to say surprises, but good surprises.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe.
Something. Oh.
Yep.
So I saw you sipping right before we hit record, and you mumbled something about actually making coffee.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't make coffee the way you make coffee, Kelvin. Mm-hmm. I make coffee by pulling the, little biodegradable pod out of the box, sticking it in the Keurig, pushing the plunger down and pressing the button, and then praying that there's enough water in there and I don't have to walk out and fill it up. But if that's the criteria for making coffee, I did that. And then when it came out, I dressed it up with my coffee dressings. And here I am, late in the afternoon, having a cup of coffee. It is not thematically selected, for the record.
At the risk of a shameless plug, because I can't resist, in that new, not quite a newsletter thing that I'm doing monthly over on the LinkedIn newsletter platform, The Lift, I throw in like a little coffee tidbit each month. And, I have those kind of planned out, and they really kind of address every step in the coffee making process to some extent or another. Water, certainly one of the things. And as I was listening to your Keurig thing, I was wondering, how old was the water that was in?
No, I'm pretty good about that.
Okay, all right. That's good. I feel
fresh.
Better.
Yeah,
that's good. Keep it fresh.
I dump it out every week, at least, maybe more often.
That's good.
If there's any left, yeah.
That's good. Okay, I feel better about that now. That's good. Well, my coffee today, I'm fortunate to be remote this afternoon, which meant that I could go and just make myself a pour-over of some freshly roasted, freshly ground coffee in my Disney monorail mug here.
Yeah. Orlando themed, yes.
That's right. Just along for the ride, it says. Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas. Yes.
I know it well. Yeah, it's been a long time for me, but yes, I know it well.
That's right. This is a blend from Excelsior Coffee in the San Francisco, California Bay Area. And it's a little bit unusual in that it's a blend. It's got the usual suspects, but it's also got a Yemeni coffee, a coffee from Yemen in there, which I want to say maybe we've managed to get coffee from Yemen in here at least once previously, but it's not an all the time kind of a thing, and certainly never a blend. And it's pretty good. Excelsior. This blend is called Panoramic, taking a wide view of the terrain, I guess. Panoramic. Maybe because they have so many different sources. I don't know. Maybe that's it. So there was an attempt, middling though it might have been, at a connection
of
there.
Something you're laying down there. For what it's worth, mine's a blend too. It's Green Mountain Coffee Nantucket blend that I am drinking.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice.
But not panoramic. And I think that might be the hook I'm going to attach to. I think this has something to do with a broad view, a scan of the landscape, such as one might see in a panorama. Am I in the ballpark?
I would say so. And I mean, just bonus points, the fact that while we might have had a Yemeni coffee on before once or twice, it's not been something that we've really gone to a lot. That's the other part. So you're going to tell people what we're talking about?
Sure. So, while we in online and digital education routinely champion a student-centered focus on potential, what we call post-traditional modern learners, continued trends in K-12 education continue to impact our first time in college or FTIC higher ed experience. And those of us in what we often refer to as academic innovation can rally to do something now to prepare. Like, how do we prepare for what I've called the 21st century digital learner, which isn't necessarily the adult non-traditional learner?
Right.
So, there's going to be some show notes for this episode with all kinds of sources that I will confess you found. You did most of the prep here, but they're good sources. I've looked at them, and I think they're going to inform our conversation today.
Yeah. So we have, of course, spoken about the importance of centering on students and their needs many, many, many times. It's sort of a theme on the podcast. And I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think maybe we've only had one episode where we touched on K-12 to any significant effect. We talked with a high school guidance counselor about the higher ed impact of the K-12 experience of emergency ad hoc remote instruction. It has a title, something like, I never want to do online again.
I remember that one. Yeah. That was in the throes of the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, just beginning to maybe, I think K-12 was sort of coming back, maybe faster or whatever. But I think this is the first time that we've really tackled big K-12 trends broadly. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And there's certainly been plenty of fodder to talk about. It's just not really, we've had, enough on our plates with the higher ed world where I feel like I have some expertise. The K-12 space, I do feel like I get a little over my head because it is just a different world with policy and the expectations. But I have talked a lot about it when I'm talking about the impact of emergency remote instruction, kind of to your previous callback to our other episode. And the fact that while we had digital divide issues in higher ed, they were much worse in K-12. And there are a lot of students, especially those on the lower socioeconomic rungs, that really suffered during COVID. Because they didn't necessarily have the equipment, infrastructure, bandwidth at home. But even if they did, oftentimes their parents, if they had a two-parent home, had to work in jobs that were not Zoom eligible. Like they were out driving a truck somewhere or they were, doing something that they couldn't be home for. So these students, even if they had equipment, and many of them didn't, were left home alone on their own devices that resulted in a lot of them maybe not having developed the discipline yet, because some of them are so young to really take advantage or keep up. And as a result, which is sort of the inspiration for this episode, you and I were talking about it, there's been learning loss. We hear it from our faculty. So it does have higher ed implications.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess the sort of the broad outline for this will be to address some of the handful of trends that we've got some summaries of, and then across different kinds of domains, and then maybe spend a little bit of time talking about, okay, now I'm depressed, but now what? As a digital learning professional, what do I do about that? And I think, to summarize a little bit from what you were saying, Tom, I mean, I guess at the outset, to some extent, as goes K-12, so goes higher ed, at least a portion, portion of higher ed. And the degree to which there are struggles in K-12 means there are threats to success in higher ed, which in turn, depending on the nature of those things, could lead to further under preparation for the workforce as well. And I think, I don't know that we have any sources that really come out and say this explicitly, but I think the undercurrent is there in the sources that we have, that I think some of these trends, and I'm just checking myself, I think this is right. I think some or maybe all of these trends were underway, and then the whole COVID pandemic experience just exacerbated them. I think. I don't think it was. There may be some that were unique, but I think we were already there. In my in my family, we've been talking about, we have K-12 connections, and it's like, yeah, you think it's bad now, it's only going to get worse. That's what I've been hearing for years, and I don't think everybody wants to hear that, but buckle up.
I honestly don't really know. I mean, you would be closer to that given your experience and connections to K-12 education. But yeah, I'll take your word for it. I just sort of know what I hear talking to our faculty who perennially lament about the preparation of the incoming student class. And as you say, it's only just gotten worse since COVID. And now, based on some of these sources, there are data to back up some of these anecdotal impressions that the faculty have been having about these students when they're coming in. But if I could just make one sort of editorializing comment here, that, okay, I grant that, yeah, the students are coming in less prepared and with a different set of expectations. I'm not sure the answer is, okay, yeah, we just don't admit them or we fail them. We kind of have to meet them a little bit where they are, especially this COVID generation, where I'm not sure it's entirely all their fault.
Oh my gosh.
And so what can we do to bring them up? I'm not saying lower standards, but what can we do to bring them up to our standards by providing extra support or remediation or programs or whatever the case might be? I think there's a path there. And I'm getting ahead of myself because I know you wanted to kind of close on what can we do about it.
Yeah.
But it just feels like there's a way to kind of move forward without just saying, oh, well, a lost generation, too bad.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's exactly right. And I worry sometimes, right? I mean, I just had yet another conversation like this morning with a colleague, right? That, there's a lot of angles here. Like this particular colleague was lamenting, there's the, okay, teach the students you have, not the students that you think you have. But she was lamenting that as like an ending versus a beginning. And I'm like, well, sure. I mean, admitting you have a problem is step 1, not step 12.
Yeah.
I mean, now what? And it really is incumbent upon, I think, all of us, right, who touch the elephant in the dark room to rally together in our respective roles to do something about it. But I've had those conversations where individuals are like, they need to stop letting these students in who don't meet. Yeah. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, really. Well, I mean, because a lot of this stuff you've pulled on, and maybe I'll ask you to maybe just pick some interesting stats that jumped out at you. But, it's one, the broad themes are like sort of this under preparation compared to previous generations of students for whatever reason, but exacerbated by COVID. And then, the other is that like, they're not even like showing up, because there's this demographic cliff that we're facing. So the idea of, well, we're just going to get more selective, they're not going to be there because the students are not coming. Right.
Yes,
so it's becoming a bit of it's going to be Hunger Games out there for higher ed pretty soon, where we're all going to be competing for the one student out there.
or we do a better job of widening the lens, not just of like
Yes.
more post-traditional, varied potential learners, but also, I don't know the best way to talk about this. Like you said, and I think this is appropriate, not lowering our standards, but not holding to our standards so religiously that, okay, you don't get in, right? I mean, it's more of like, okay, scaffold, make a difference. Yeah, I think the center of the bullseye from a recent webinar that I sat in on that displayed a lot of data that really got my attention is it wasn't really new to me, but it just really was. It just sharpened the focus on the need. It really is declining K-12 reading and math competencies. There's other stuff. There are data on what researchers are calling chronic absenteeism. There are mental health patterns, which I think many of us have been following for years. There's even, we certainly know we've been talking about artificial intelligence on this podcast for a while, but there's maybe paying attention to what's happening with AI in K-12. But these declining reading and math competencies, I think, are attention getting. Math, right? Because of its sometimes its gatekeeping function in certain disciplines and its basis for opening up study. I mean, I don't know. I always picture a former colleague who started out as an engineering major, and after math did its thing, she went a different direction. I mean, I think a lot of people are in that category, but and some of these data are more recent and some are dated by a year or two. And they look at, there's mile markers like at high school graduation versus like, say, 8th grade or 4th grade, and then what the patterns hold. But in 2022, we have, let's see if I can unpack this a little bit. What's basically a continuing to decline proficiency in math with each of these cohorts. So the students who would today, as we're recording this episode, be second-year college students were 9 percentage points lower in math readiness than the same aged students pre-pandemic in 2019. And this year's 2025's 9th graders and 5th graders were 5 percentage points and 13 percentage points lower than their pre-pandemic counterpoints.
Yeah.
Those are attention-getting kind of numbers.
They really are. And when I looked at those data, I think that I was looking in the EAB presentation, that gap was consistent across all ethnicities and sort of all these demographics, filters and slices. Everybody was below, which makes you think, okay, I mean, that's the result of the pandemic. It did impact everyone to some degree. And it's not just an anecdote coming from, 1 or 2 faculty that are, grumpy about not having, Ivy League students in their classroom.
Yeah, and I think the math thing I hear talked about a lot, and I think we may not know those specifics, but we kind of get it, and we talk about, supports for math, course taking and all that, but reading, right? Reading so important because maybe you're not going to be an engineer, right? But everybody has to read. And you pretty much have to read in order to learn. So 1/3, only about 1/3 of K-12 students were reading proficient in 2022. 1/3 reading proficient.
Yeah, that's shocking. Only, I mean, that is who is reading at proficiency level. And
yes.
Yeah, it's only 1/3. That's crazy. And you did kind of touch on this, but I'm going to underscore it, this chronic absenteeism, because that's probably a contributing factor. I think the stat was, let me look at it, it was more than a quarter, 29%, so almost a third of public K through 12 students missed 10% or more of the whole school year in 2022, which equals being chronically absent. So if you're missing 10% or more of the instruction, well, big surprise that you're not reading and doing math at grade proficiency levels. But then I think the more insidious piece of that is that these students are disengaging, and they're, okay, maybe they'll graduate from high school. Some won't, which is bad enough. But the ones who do graduate from high school, because they don't see the value in going to high school, they're certainly not going to see the value in going to college. And so they're lost to us, maybe forever, but certainly for a long time, unless we can convince them once they get into the workforce that it's going to be to their advantage to get a post-secondary degree. As you kind of set up, it's like these things are all connected. They're like dominoes that hit each other, and they all impact each other, and is ultimately to the workforce, because we know we need nurses and we need engineers and we need all of these professions, and the pipeline's not filling like it once was.
Yeah, and a point that was made in this webinar, that we have a free public link to the recording we'll put in the show notes, that I thought was a good point about the stuff we've been talking about is really academic, but then there's like the mental health component. And, the presenter in this webinar made this comment that mental health and academic issues are mutually reinforcing. So the lack of academic readiness contributes to mental health challenges. Mental health challenges contribute to lack of academic readiness. And I think we're all relatively, it feels like, attuned kind of industry-wide in higher education that we've seen the impact of mental health challenges. But here are a couple of stats from 2023. In 2023, 59% of high school students reported feeling, quote, anxious most days, unquote, with the anxiety worse in more vulnerable groups such as first generation, the students who are headed to, if they're headed toward college, they would be the first ones to go to college. So that's that kind of the ethnic minorities, LGBTQ plus students and so forth. And then that's anxious most days, but then same year, 52% of high school students reported feeling moderately, very, or extremely, quote, concerned about their mental health, unquote. More than half concerned about their mental health, 59% anxious most days. Mental health challenges exacerbates academic preparedness exacerbates mental health.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if the mental health stats you just read are connected to the chronic absenteeism as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So yeah, we hear about it in higher ed. In fact, when I talk to the folks over in our counseling center and other places, that student mental health in higher ed is like the topic of our time. And it's an issue, and it's only sort of exploded in recent years to the point where they don't feel adequately resourced to kind of meet the demand. And I'm sure we're not unique. I think a lot of schools are in the same boat. There are now companies that have sprung up that you can outsource your mental health services to, because it's become such a need that that students have. So, yeah, and I'm not sure how connected that is to online learning or digital learning, except that a lot of these companies are digital first, virtual counseling sessions that, are able, like one of the limitations we've had is our counselors are only licensed in the state of Florida. Right. So it's really hard for us to kind of offer those kinds of services. And so we don't to any of our online students, because if we do one, we have to do it for everybody. But these companies are able to get people who are licensed across the country. And it's there are some real advantages to it. And especially if you've got a big online operation that is spanning multiple states, it is something to think about.
And we probably don't even have time to talk about paying attention to AI use and so forth, but maybe we should turn our attention a little bit, more specifically. You set this up at the front end, Tom, but as we start to think about landing the plane, what should those of us in higher ed digital learning and in the broader academic innovation community do about all this? What can we do about this?
Yeah, great question. I think that the first thing, and we've talked about this before many times on the podcast, I think we've even called it sort of our North Star. It's the student, right? Mm-hmm. You need to pay attention to the student and think about what's in the best interests of the student. So what can we do within our sphere of influence, within our scope, to kind of serve the student where they are? And there's lots of things we can do, whether that's adaptive learning for remediation or preparation courses or, earned admission or whatever, outreach, counseling sessions, coaching, all of the things that are kind of supplemental to the instruction to get the student to the point where they can meet the standards. I think we could play a big part in it, because digital and online learning and technologies can scale in a way that you just can't in a face-to-face environment as easily.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think as a field, those of us around digital education and that branch of academic innovation, we're used to doing those things, thinking differently, but being data-driven and at scale, right? And so I'm not looking to beat up on anybody, but not everybody in higher ed thinks that way. So when we're trying to think differently, I think we can help with that, So even something as simple as sharing findings, from those data-driven efforts, even if it's just stuff within our purview immediately, or extending our efforts to broader scale data gathering, sharing findings with colleagues across silos of the institution, that's at least a way of fostering something that might lead toward partnering.
Yeah. Yeah. And in many ways, we have the data, and oftentimes. I've talked about this before, but you were here when we were doing this, but we were very quickly using data as sort of a pilot early warning system for students who were at risk on how they were and if they were engaging in the LMS as a proxy for engagement or being at risk in the mental health context. We still haven't quite sharpened the pencil on that, but I think there's some promise there. And that's an example of how digital learning can help.
Yeah. And probably the more adoption that you have of the tools and the mechanisms of digital learning, the more helpful you can be. Like, for instance, the more adoption of the LMS there is, the more the LMS could potentially be helpful. The less adoption, the less helpful, but nevertheless, you could still use it, right?
Yeah.
And then I think about, we've talked about the teaching and learning orientation of kind of our through line in this podcast. So I think our faculty facing efforts around course design and teaching practices can amplify awareness of those trends and orienting toward more supportive practices, both in the class, but also referring outside the class. I put it in that order because I worry sometimes that it's just we should refer the student. Yeah, okay. I think that's right. But also there are things we know from the literature that will benefit a wide swath of students. Like we had Justin Schaefer on, I guess last year. He talked about high structure course design, right? Broadly beneficial.
Yeah. And, maybe at the end of the day, the more we can talk to each other, learn best practices, what worked, what didn't. And so we can kind of all collectively raise this water, so all the boats rise, I think would be good. And I think as a community, the online learning community does that really well.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that broadly we are increasingly seen as partners who are more mainstream. As we've talked a few times over recent episodes, I think some institutions are really leaning into that and some are maybe pulling away from it. But goodness, we ought to show up and even with the elbow our way to the table.
Yeah. Well, and I use that term, the 21st century digital learner. I think what I mean by that is like, it's not necessarily just the 35-year-old, single mom working who's going back to school. And we need to continue to support her. But these are the 18-year-olds who experienced online and emergency remote instruction during COVID, who are coming to college and having expectations about onlineness that previous generations didn't necessarily have. And that's part of meeting them where they are as well.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Cool. Should I try and put a bow on the plane?
Put a bow on it. Put it under a tree.
Land the present. Yeah. All right. So while those of us engaged in strategic digital education must have a wider view of post-traditional modern learners, we must also be alert to the trending needs of recent high school graduates who will become those new 21st century students.
Yeah.
They're coming to your campus, whether you expect them or not. They're going to be there.
And they won't stay long if you don't take care of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go someplace else. It might mean they just go. And that would be bad for society, right?
Yeah, bad all the way around. That's right. But we can do something about it.
We can. So I'm encouraged. Let's end on a positive note. I am encouraged. Yes.
We have the capability. Well, this has been a robust conversation on an important topic. So do check out the show notes. There's data sources there, and there's even more than we'll put in the show notes, so that you come to your next collegial conversation with data in hand. But until next time for Topcast, I'm Kelvin.
And I'm Tom.
See ya.